Ta-da!
Yep, it's ready.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Monkeys.
Hey, now.
Testing. Yep. No problem.
All right, so we're going to get started. So Barry's going to dazzle us with some cell phone goodie stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to get started. Let him kick it off. All right, Barry.
Well, thank you, sir. Greetings, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. My name's Barry Kimball. So our talk this afternoon is going to be cell phones, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So some things about me is like, I don't know if most people, some of you know me, I've run the SMBA for Cincinnati since 2017. And then I play a little bit of Guild Wars 2, and then some other groups I hang out around with is the IoT Robot Automation Club, and do a little bit with International Gamer Developer or Independent Gamer Development Associations. So it keeps me out of trouble here and there. Stay in the world of programming a little bit from that standpoint. So the agenda, we're going to go through the good, we're going to go through the bad, we're going to go through a little bit of the terms, and then we're going to get in the ugly, and if anybody has any questions or if anybody would like to provide answers for those questions, because, you know, probably somebody out here has an answer for them. But anyhow, I see that I'm not going to go out here on a limb and say that there aren't too many people in here that are sub 30 this afternoon. Yeah. Because remember, you know, so we all are quite well versed in what a world is like without cell phones. And I proposed the question, what are some of the great advantages cell phones have brought to our universe? Exactly. That's right.
Information at your fingertips, like minimal effort.
Yeah, I find that one a little disturbing, but yes, pretty useful. Paintball. Yeah, the camera, I find camera pretty nice.
My wife can always get a hold of
I said, yeah. Oh, anybody else got any suggestions or comments?
Track my teenager.
Yeah, track your teenager. It's nice to know. Anybody that has, you know, iPhones probably have a nice puppy pic from Micah this afternoon, if they haven't checked yet. And they're, oh shoot, what's that called? Your iDrop, yeah, for Apple's great features. Anyhow, I know one of the biggest things I have felt, because as many times as I've been in wrecks and on the side of the road, being able to call for help is a very nice advantage over what I remember growing up. Some of the things, like you're saying, cameras, the photos, Google Lens. Some of the other applications too is, I don't know how many people know this, like it's actually utilized in farming, tracking, you know, how the farm's producing, where the machinery, I mean, it's down to the point where they track like every square inch of what produces on a farm and the moisture levels. It's pretty crazy, some of the things that are out there. The games, entertainment, anybody stuck in a airport for 5 or 6 hours, or, you know, nowadays it gets into being days. Education and, you know, entertainment, working remotely. I remember the first time I really realized, especially with the world of tablets, being able to fix switches from across the country on vacation was a wonderful realization of, you know, not having to panic while you're out of town. Because not everybody back at the home office know how, you know, to bring stuff back up. Music libraries, being able to take what you want with you. Been some pretty nice perks. Biohealth people, or, you know, anybody, you know, that has monitoring devices, Oreo or Orium, I forgot what the name of that ring was. Aura. Bio-tracks all your stuff, and so you have a record of your phone and your sleeping patterns and heart rates and everything. Especially for people that have heart fibrillations and stuff, it's nice features. And to get into the more fun stuff, what are some of the disadvantages cell phones have brought to society in the last, just in the last few years, but say in the last decade or two?
Addiction to cell phones.
Addiction to cell phones. Yeah. Yeah, phone numbers. Well, and that's the other thing I find interesting too, the sheer volume of how everybody expects you to have a cell phone now too. Yeah, it's very entertaining because like, I'm a very anti-QR person for some reason, and with the recent events in health and everybody expecting you to read their menu via your own cell phone, I'm like, I ain't got a phone on me. And, and the faces you get in some of these restaurants is very mind-boggling because they're the sub-30 class or 30 age. You can't comprehend not having a phone, even though we all have one. But anybody enjoy dinners with some millennials or parties? But I mean, you see this in some of the. I'm not blaming all 30. There's a lot of people above 32 that have turned into this kind of generation too. I mean, I've got an aunt that rather text you than talk to you from across the room half the time. But kind of it disturbs me. But so the other side effects, just the e-waste. I mean, we're rotating through cell phones like they're chump change, and there's some pretty hard and rare materials in them. And like forced obsolescence just based on, even though the device is still good, everybody's got to have the newest, latest model. Just explosions, some of them, it's been a few years, some have been pretty stable for the last couple, but haven't had any explode, I don't know, in mass volumes like the Samsungs were doing there for a while. But the attention distractions and time sinks, how much time people actually are spending on the devices. Cyberbullying, I mean, yes sir. So nomophobia is kind of what he mentioned. It's a new psychological problem where people are actually terrified of not having their phone within reach. So it's, if you, especially if it goes out, they don't know what to do anymore because they don't communicate or talk, right? Or what's that? Yeah. Yeah, on your phone, right? Yeah, that's this thing that used to be called libraries. Used to carry. Right. But yeah, there's some of the other things too. Is a continuous work day. I don't know how many of us, know people that actually don't unplug from work. They continue to work well past the hours of their average day just because it's accessible.
Which of these would be the ones where we with like the ubiquity of people expected to have a cell phone?
I'm sorry?
Which one would be the people expected to have a cell phone for doing everything?
Oh, I don't have it up there, I don't think. I was just, this is just a list, of some random things that I was looking at, just trying to review and think over what, kind of impact. I mean, it's had a very massive impact on society in the last 20 years, and just, a lot of people, especially younger generation, have no concept of what it's like to not have them in their hands 24/7. So this is kind of, like a review to get started with. Some of the other things too is like the lower counts and stuff is like our health is related to the lack of sleep and everything else from the exposure. yeah, if some people's entire life's on their device. If you lose it, they don't, have the virtual credit cards or everything are on their cell phone. Yeah. Yeah. How many people, if you did lose your phone, have your contact list somewhere to, be able to restructure all that nowadays?
I just like talking to him before, so.
Well, that's one of the things that terrifies my uncle. He's got a list or a contact list of 700 or 800 people or better. He freaks out, that his phone's going to die one day. And I'm like, oh, it's, this is, yeah. The Android records all that for us. But then what's the side effect too is like for children, the parents spend so much time on their phones and not paying attention or actually raising their children. It's kind of disturbing.
Raise your kids.
Yeah, hand them an iPad. So I thought this was kind of interesting because anybody been on campus in the last few years?
I got a question for you.
Sure.
Back to that slide.
Certainly.
You ever heard of Douglas Adams?
Yes.
He used to have somebody else's problem field that you can walk through the scene that's coming apart, nobody will see you. That's what those aliens are.
Yeah. Nice. So let's look at some of the terms in alphabet here. So in the world of cell phones, IMSI, which is the International Mobile Subscriber Identity, kind of like your, it's like your, well, it's not necessarily your MAC address, it's your particular unique identifier for your wireless, where your MAC address is actually going to be your IMEI. Which is what's hard-coded on your phone, which pretty much anymore that's kind of ubiquitous. Nobody really cares about that as much as it was in an earlier age. That was what I found really shocking is like the phone carriers now don't even care if you move your SIM card from machine or phone to phone to phone. It's like I was kind of floored by that because you used to have to register that in the older days. GSM, Global Systems for Mobile Communications, basically kind of how the phone cell system has been regulated globally for the radios to work in different countries. So you have a TDMA, 8, which also includes 8 simultaneous calls on the same radio frequency by splicing the second into so many fragments that you multiplex. Very interesting. LTE, which was considered long-term evolution, which denotes for us that have been around and seen the different generations of phone, that you had faster phone digital service. And then we're going to do a lot of talks about cell site simulators. I'm sorry?
I was thinking of 4G LTE. That's a LTE.
Yeah. So LTE came out a little bit before 4G, I think, but then 4G really is where the speed started really coming on.
Transition from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Now 5.
So some of the uglies with the phone systems. We got spyware, malware, stingrays, if anybody, we'll cover stingrays and stuff here in a bit, but can we think of any good or bad things that spyware might be good for on a cell phone?
Track your kids.
Certainly. Tracking your kids, guidance systems, mapping or let you know where you're going around in your car. Yeah. Have you guys seen the article where the guy put like 400 or 500 phones in a wheelbarrow, rolled them down New York City, and made it look like a traffic jam? Google started rerouting everybody around. real fun entertainment there. That guy was brilliant. It's awful, but it's a thing, right? You know, people figure out ways to abuse or use, you know, what you want here. So yeah, definitely for the good thing, the malwares is found, you know, or well, not malware necessarily per se, but the spyware. The next slide will be a bunch of different spywares that are available and stuff. But yeah, child monitoring, recording your calls, data tracking activities, recovering your data, being able to remotely wipe your device if it's been stolen. You know, that's.
I know, like truck drivers and trucking companies, they use something like that, so they know where the trucks are and where the packages are for delivery.
Certainly.
Stuff like that. So.
The side effect too of every good thing is there's somebody figures out a bad way to use it, of course, too. So I mean, you get the stalking, being able to geolocate and track kids. The camera activation, listening on the mics, dumping the device, and keyloggers could kind of go under either way, depending on whether you want to log what you're doing on your phone or not. But that's definitely some side effects. But here's what I found very interesting. Due to the fact that spyware is kind of, because of the children monitoring and everything else, it's kind of considered a gray application. So there are a plethora of of companies out there that provide that as a service, right? Some of these get pretty interesting, like Moby Stealth and stuff like that. They're basically designed specifically for that, to install on your child's device to track and be able to monitor what they're doing. And I mean, it's, you know, it can be used for good or bad, just like everything else on it. Yeah, I mean, I'd class anything that turns your camera on as spyware, personally. But this also, I mean, the teachers are using that kind of software too to make sure that the kids are there for educational purposes, you know, because they're doing remote classing. Some of these apps too, like MSpy and what was the other one down there? FlexiSpy. They actually drop on your phone and they pretend to be other apps, right? So that you don't realize that there's a spy app. So they're hidden as like a settings control for your phone or some other app to kind of make them stealthier. Which is interesting concepts. So whether it's, you know, because if you're the parent, you don't want the kids knowing that you put spy device on your phone, right? So it also, some of these hide very well from malwares too, just because they're. Well, yeah, I could see that. Right. They'd overlook it because of what it. Well, and I'm sure that's becoming kind of a commonplace thing nowadays too, especially with like Taiwan, for example. They were after people, anybody that had their chat relay app. So there was a like spin up of like 15 different apps to switch to, so that China couldn't monitor what they were trying to organize for marches and stuff. I didn't really come across that when I was digging through that, but that's a pretty interesting direction to look down too. Alexa, I mean, it's technically not a cell phone, but I mean, that's your 1984 model that you installed in your house on your own.
Monitoring kids, tracking kids for it was a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to evolve for me monitoring my apps. And that's the headlight.
Yeah, certainly. It helps, especially if you know. Yeah, you give them a phone and then was it dementia, and you can track your parent, and so another advantage. So, of course, there's a lot of discussions, and of course, fraud's on the rise. Malware is notoriously horrible on cell phones, as I imagine most of us know, especially Android. There's been a fairly large time frame window which, Android ships their phones. They had 256 known vulnerabilities, and they shipped the phone with all of those active. In the last version or two, they've started to realize that wasn't necessarily a great idea, so I think a lot of those have been addressed, and some of them actually are turned off now, and you have to enable them to use whatever. But the app stores are a lovely place to collect, very good collections of Chrome, but not Chrome. At the particular month in December, there was at least 3 versions of Chrome on the Play Store that were not Chrome. Quick stands, a lot of malwares that are, antivirus that are, they're going to clean stuff, but we're adding stuff in the side effect too, or selling your data. This was a breakdown from one of the companies of just how bad cell phone apps are, especially anybody use their phones for banking in here? So this one was specifically for banking, especially if you're using Android, like all the Android malwares that were discovered. Yeah, 100% of them have, the malwares collect your APP and PI information from banking. That's just insane to me that it's that crazy. But I mean, banks, of course, are the #1 target, usually. iOS isn't much better. There's, I had a little bit on there. There's definitely been some Trojans for that. Yeah.
How do they get it on there?
Now that's the tricky part. Apple actually has kind of some of the similar issues with their Play Store. Not as much as Apple was very strict on first iteration of an app that goes onto their store. But then, so like say update 5 versions down, and it's being introduced as a backdoor. So, like the light app, like your camera, or turn your light on. Those apps for iPhones are horribly bad. They give you a nice button to turn on the light, but it also gives the back door to your phone. So and they harvest data and everything else to it, but it allows them to get in that way. And then this was a list of some of the bank Trojans. That was somebody who's been paying attention or heard Hydra and Zebra usually, or Cerberus or whatever, usually pretty well known. I was actually kind of shocked to see that U.S. was not one of the higher targets. Spain and Turkey, but the banking systems are a lot more targeted overseas than they are here.
More secure. I say that in quotes.
Yeah.
Other countries.
My philosophy has been in the past, I think, if we had a bigger stick, we'd come get you. And so some groups kind of don't target us as much.
does actually
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe no, it does.
Yeah, as I say, it was a pretty interesting report. That was one of the things that reminds me too, that if you like to see what the newfangled stuff is for phones and cell phone attacks, it's usually South Korea. They see a lot of really weird new stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they got a lot of targets, I guess, but
Neighbor to the north.
there's some very interesting like pixel attacks and phone overlays, screen overlays for key logging and stuff that came out. out of South Korea for banking attacks.
That contract Android only, or also iOS now?
This was just Android.
That might be why we're not up there either. Our shift, like our spread between iOS and Android is probably heavier since we were running this thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Android outclasses iPhone nowadays too, overseas especially. So that'd be why Spain's probably a little bit.
That's a much fighting word.
Yeah. But data collection apps. Anybody ever run a web page and visit such glorious pages like a New York Post, I think it was, and how many, like just landing on their page, they sell your information to like 56 different companies. So that used to be what I considered high when I did a pixel tracking talk a few years ago. But the number of companies, Facebook, or I was really shocked by Pinterest, sell your information to is astonishing. They're actually, even the EFF has done a big study on the Ring doorbell app, and that the volume of data harvesting they do off your phone when you put their app on here is mind-boggling to what all they sell and harvest your name and phone number, address, geotag, which is...
What value does that have anymore? If everybody has the same information, everybody's collecting your information, everybody has it.
That's kind of what I use. At some point, there's such an overlay, it's insane. But there's continuous live data now, right? So, and that's how, Facebook knows who to recommend as friends because your phone was in proximity of a friend, right? It's kind of disturbing to me anyway. But anybody in here know what SS7 is? Alrighty. So that's the signal systems control for how cell phones is basically handled. They handle all the throughput for cell phone technology and the protocols worldwide. Established, with the early, once we started getting past it and up into 2G and it started making phones for the rest of the world. But what's interesting is for as secure as that's supposed to be, there's a lot of bad actors that have gained access to it, of course, over the years. And yeah, this is a declassified document. But what I find interesting too is, so this is from a 2017 report, that there's 7.7 billion phone subscriptions with 7.6 billion people on the planet. So there's already 100 million more phones than there are people. Now, a large part of that, I think, because more current reports, there's a substantially lower number, which I find that vaguely odd, but I think they're taking out the IoT, because those are not necessarily on people. But like we had our BlackBerry guy at your BlackBerry phones. They're at, International Paper Route, a guy like with 7 of them, because he's on call. He's the BlackBerry guy Yeah.
If it's connected to the carrier as well, is that a separate subscription?
Well, at that time, I would assume probably not, because that wasn't around yet. But it'd be any device that had an active subscription that I would assume that you're paying for. But in today's age, though, you're talking about you got water monitors out in the field, you've got buoys out in the ocean. Yeah, anybody that's got a phone modem device in it, basically.
Some phones have
IoT type device, home security systems, and all this stuff in there.
Yeah.
I think I even have a couple tablets that have.
So.
I never use them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is the volume of IoT stuff that actually has it built in now than what it was 2 years ago is crazy.
Devices actually have the cellular capability.
Yeah.
GPS trackers.
Yeah. Well, even the tokens and stuff from Apple. Yes, sir.
Back in the phone freak days, John Draper was going to capture front. They used the fact that the older system signals used advanced tones, right? So you could just put the tones through a voice channel.
The ham interface.
So it sounds like with these signaling system 7, they're not doing that. Everything's out of band now, but it sounds like it's just hacking the system.
Yeah. Well.
You can't do advanced signaling.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of people that, I mean, it's just a platform like anything else. Anybody that's hacked into it. Yeah. And you can still, if you really know what you're doing, you can still probably seize towers and stuff too. What's that? Yeah. The 2G's gone, but I mean, it's still, well, it's gone for
You get a 2G phone, they don't work anymore.
yeah, commercially, but there's still 2G used in farm and agricultural relays, I think, and unless it's all 3G only.
You're dealing with, and I did a couple of years ago, you're dealing with IoT, the IoT, LTE, the LTE 1, 2.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those use out of band, not in band side channel communication over
To a relay.
4G.
Something relays to it and upscales it. Well, I was just saying too, because I thought it was awfully odd, because I've got a friend that does a lot of work in farm stuff for John Deere, and it was all 2 and 3G, and I'm like, well, they're getting rid of 3G. It's like, what are you guys doing? It's like, it's still going to be around. So I was like, okay, it's just for.
I'm kind of curious on that. I know the cellular modules are not typically dropped in the field.
Yeah.
Those are usually some type of hubs, and they use, I can't even think what it's called, communication, which is like
Yeah, it's data burst.
it has a
Narrow band.
I can't think of it, but it has ranges. They're often ranges. There's very little data.
Right. It's low band.
Miles.
But as I say, I know the 3G, because I did read through when I originally put this talk together, especially on the 3G, even though it went away for commercial use, it was still utilized for like a narrow band for field instrumentation IoT device relay. They reserved like a very small band, still for, not people use, but it's well, that's the key too, is like the government was still rolling out 3G sensor devices last year, or whatever, when they decommissioned made everybody switch to 4G. It was like, but that's why there's a reserve there for it. I can't, like you said, it's been a few months, so I kind of forgot what it was called too, but it's still out there. But it's, like I said, it's for communication, specifically for devices that were kind of grandfather reserved in that band. The actual rest of it was converted to 5G for cell use. So this is kind of a schematic layout of the GSM network and how it interfaces with SS7 and the different access points that hackers have the ability to utilize. So ISM, or the IMSI catchers, which is the Stingrays and the old 2G technology, and accessing to the internet or international aggregate controls. That's somebody, can log into the website and access the information for your cell or for your phone number and track you regardless of what you do, because they have access to the ISP level information. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting, and most of the devices we're going to cover here in the next few slides or whatever, though, they're all some type of fish. And came across a little tidbit here the other day that I forgot last month or when I gave this talk or whatever, but anybody heard of Kevin Mitnick?
No, never heard of it.
So that poor fellow got to experience to be the first generation of what they called the triggerfish. Is kind of how they were able to home in on him, which is basically they were spoofing data and acting as a cell phone tower. That home in on the phone systems that he was using to utilize or whatever. I don't know who actually built that original. It was probably a division of Harris, but Harris builds pretty much any of the ones with the fish name in it, so I'm assuming that Triggerfish was probably built by them as well. But the Stingray was their 2G device. Amberjack's their 3G device. Kingfish kind of rides between 3 and 4G. And Hailstorm was their last official public sold device. As of 2020, they no longer sell equipment to the general population any longer. Allegedly, according to their statement, that the technology of 5G outscoped their tools and that it was no longer a viable path to go down. But there's another company, NCSO, or was it NSO? Double check that there. Yeah, NSO makes this oscillator NiCelf V800, which is supposedly capable of 5G interception. And there's also talk with 2 or 3 other companies out there making similar devices of what Harris used to make. Now, part of that too is Harris was also built by another company, or bought by another company, L3, if anybody's familiar. So they're L3 Harris now. I'd be really shocked if they still are not manufacturing, but it's probably restricted to 3-letter agencies or thereabouts. One of the other things too is I thought was kind of interesting, if I can remember, because it just slipped right past me. There was a Boeing does an interesting thing. They have a division of their company called Digital Receiver Technology. So it's called a dirt box, where they can actually fly over in their, like an AWACS aircraft over like a big city and capture all data communication in like New York City for as long as the plane stays in orbit of the, a couple miles or something of the city. I'm sure it probably does. Of course, I don't know why we'd talk about a balloon. Oh, balloons. Yeah. So this is this was the Harris's bread and butter device for a long while, the Stingray 2. Which was a vehicle-mounted, power-supplied cell site repeater, basically. Cell service kind of works a lot like Wi-Fi. It wants to talk to whatever's got the strongest signal it's close to in the older days. So the 2G and 3G, pretty much, it's however close you are. Or whoever's producing the highest strength. So, of course, there's regulations in FCC about how strong your signal can be, but if you're the bad guy, are you really paying attention in the first place? Yeah. So this was the Kingfisher, which was another car mount and laptop usually used in cruisers. So this would mount in the back, and then the laptop would be up with the vehicle utilizing it for, sting operations or listening on a house. This is the only photo I could find of the Nexcel V800. There is very little information on the current technology. It seems like somewhere out in 17, 18, all this is squashed. Everybody that buys one of these devices are required to sign an NDA. So they won't even acknowledge that they have them any longer, or what their information looks like. And the one on the left, kind of a handheld model. But before the lockdown and all the NDAs, these were what the ACL managed, or the ACLU managed to collect together of like what state police patrols and local police, usually in a lot of cases, local police are like the bigger cities, like say Columbus or New York or Chicago. In these states, it's not necessarily statewide because they were not cheap devices, right? We saw like $150,000 for some of the portable units for the 3 and 4G. But it was interesting just to be aware of what states have that capability and feature for monitoring, and they're usually used for drug trafficking, tracking and stuff. But it's out there. Anybody know what this show is?
Person of interest.
So, interesting thing, I don't know if too many people paid much attention when this show came out. This first kind of brought attention to the whole cell site repeater technology, and of course this was based in New York City. So you realize that, New York City has fairly good cell phone coverage. So they started realizing and monitoring, looking around at the amount of cell towers that were real cell towers, and found that like somewhere in the ballpark of 70-80% of the cell towers in New York City were not registered, legal, government, state-funded cell tower repeaters, right? Can't imagine what that was for. And a large amount of them, originated around, if anybody'd like to take a guess.
9/11?
No, the NASDAQ. The stock exchange manipulation, right? So if you can intercept somebody's cell phone trying to buy stocks, you can slow it down, exactly, and intercept and pre-purchase and resell to them for 2 or 3 extra cents. Or yeah, there was a whole plethora of stuff that came into. But yeah, the cell sign, who had the fast internet access, there was companies that set up on the fiber blocks too, the guys that could intercept the transactions ahead. But yeah, they had somewhere between. It's New York City, right? And it's money. It's where the money's at. What's funny too, well, not necessarily funny, is the fact that was the largest concentration of unscheduled, per capita of cell site towers. And then shortly after that, once this kind of became realized that DC became a very popular location for unscheduled, off-the-books cell towers, right? Well, so that's a very interesting thing. So the concept of the technology is that the upgrading to the next stage of technology would kind of negate the old stuff, right?
They have to buy stuff.
Allegedly, you would think. So that some of the upgrades between 2G and 3G, of course, was supposed to be improved security, which, of course, cell phone technology lags behind computers drastically. The encryption and the protocols were not implemented correctly. So what worked for 2G fairly well worked for 3G. And then even though 4G addressed it, 4G still broadcasts your IMSI in the clear before the handshake. So 4G devices work quite well at doing this as well. That's where you start getting into the gray area, whether 5G actually improves the security or not. It's eliminated the older devices, but it's also not as secure as it should be. For example, the concept is also that the 5G operates in a higher gigahertz span, but that's for the data transfer. For your actual cell phone technology, it still works on the lower band. So they evaluating that. One of the companies that has done a study that on 15 towers, for example, in Germany in 5G, they are using kind of like a one-time pad key code, but they're using the same key code for every call. So if the bad guy is in the tower, makes a phone call, can record their call, and then make a second call, and can strip out the code for however long the duration they want to be able to listen to your call on. Right? So if they make a 2-minute call, they can generate the 2-minute keypad, so when somebody makes a call through that tower, they can listen to your call for 2 minutes. Not entirely sure where the improvement was in 5G from that standpoint. That's supposedly a misconfiguration, because they said it was 12 out of 15 towers that attack worked on. So that comes down to your employees and how well you implemented your devices and deployment. But the other thing too is I was reading over the last week or so that the data stream, or how they get it so high, is that actually the data transfer for your computer side is ranging from like 23 gigahertz to 30 gigahertz. So if you're looking for that kind of technology in the civilian hands, that's going to cost you some money. So they've kind of removed that from the general public per se at that point. But the cell phone modem is still fully accessible. So whether, depending on how the encryption is, you might be able to catch that data through the modem, but you'll have to be able to decrypt it. Which kind of brings us to an interesting thing too. If anybody's heard of Pegasus before. So this was an app that was developed by the Israel that kind of only got caught because somebody leaked the phone list of devices that were infected with this. The interesting thing is, so cell phones have a cell modem on them, which are system on chip. So there's completely standalone device on your phone. So your phone's kind of like a multiplex computer, right? You got your modem, plus you have your computer stuff, or your ARM or whatever. That modem's completely self-contained. It can operate with or without your Android or your iPhone. So it's also manufactured by a very small group of people due to patents. So you got Qualcomm, and you have Meditech, and then I'm going to mess this one up, Gamalta, who pretty much are the only manufacturers. And pretty much for the U.S., we have Qualcomm, because there's own the Broadcom manufacture most of the U.S. chips. So kind of makes it easy for Harris to have direct access to say, hey, how do those devices work, right? If you only have one or two manufacturers due to patent control, there's not a whole lot of thing. It's also very secretive, so a lot of operations and what can be done on that chip are not published, known, or is kind of the black box, security by obscurity, So if you know how to deploy or operate or manipulate that chip, that's a vulnerability in it. So some of the things that they believe is how this Pegasus attack works is they actually can deploy over the baseband of the signal and drop apps on the device through the modem. And it outskirts and is behind the doors of the operating system, so it's not detectable to the phone that they're infected, other than the fact that these collection of phone numbers were all phoning home to a specific IP address. And it was sending this kind of data, the SMS, the email, the emails, chats. But of course, some of the other malwares and stuff too can deploy these. They're saying because you can send an SMS or an iMessage with a crafted packet that activates commands on that chip for the cell modem that will deploy apps as backdoors too for malware. So it's a very interesting thing. There's a lot of stuff coming out in the last couple months on it. Anybody that's really interested, there's probably been 15 talks just on Pegasus in the last 2 months. Some of them get pretty deep and pretty interesting. I just thought it was kind of throw it in there.
Spyware that resulted in Jamal
Shoga's now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing too, is like, the one guy's talk I've been watching a lot too is, what's interesting is like Android does stealth updates, right? And anybody ever get, I don't have an Android, so any of those that do, let me know if I'm wrong, but they auto update themselves for their firmware flashes and stuff, allegedly. So, like iPhone will give you a warning, say, hey, you need to update, which also means that something's talking to your phone to tell it it's out of date, right? So they're like, exactly what's triggering that.
On the Android, you set your phone up to either auto update or let you know.
Does it?
There's a firmware update available.
Okay. So I didn't.
It works when there's a firmware update. In that case, it's an outgoing request. So it goes, hey, this is my ID. What's the latest ID?
Mm-hmm.
Your phone makes a request. Now, that's what I see in communications.
Okay.
And then it goes, hey, it doesn't match. This, I'm 1.1, that says 1.2. I need to get a firmware upgrade that alerts you. Do you want to get an upgrade?
Right.
You can set your phone to either automatically download it and update it, or just automatically download it and let you do the update.
Yeah. Well, so, and I, as I'm not having Android, I can completely understand that that's a thing. What he pointed out in his discussion, though, that he has talked with people, especially with Android devices, if you walk across certain locations in the U.S. government or U.S. territories, there are places where your phone will auto receive an update regardless in stealth mode. So like if you go walking on a particular base in, I think he said Massachusetts, if you come within a mile of it, your phone just geo updates. And they mention, he doesn't mention what 3-letter agency happens to be in that facility, but that, the devices are being pushed in a geotagged area. So then that comes back to the modem. What are they pushing to that modem? And if the modems have some kind of flash or can be reprogrammed, based on what you do with it too, because the technology is not well published, leads for interesting concepts of what kind of attacks we could be looking at.
If there's any updates taking place on the cellular modules that are inside, that's going to be done silently.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's, he specifically went out, that there are features, and that was the thing too, is like, and I guess in earlier versions of the phone, I never really had a really great phone for a long time. I ran an old flip phone for 12 years before resorting to an iPhone, but he was saying that the phones used to warn you when you got downgraded. So like when 4G came out, if you got bumped down to 3G or something, or 2G from one of these cell towers, because that was a real common attack to keep the Stingray active for an extra 4 or 5 years, as they'd bump you back down. The phones would notify you that you were being downgraded, and it said it would pop up a window, and it said people got so annoyed with it, they've turned all those features off. Right, so most phones don't notify you anymore of a security change on your device any longer, or like certain things like Android is not versions like 14 and up or something don't notify you of updates any longer. But as I said, it's a changing world, as everything else is. So he was asking earlier. Well, this was a very interesting article. If anybody's familiar with Hackaday. Sadly, by the time I'd learned of it, it was deleted. But I have a screenshot of it. I wish I had copied the rest of the article, but I have the screenshot of this. But it was build your own GSM base station for fun and profit. I wish I knew what the profit was, but what's in? Yeah, educational research purposes. Yeah, no surveillance vans at all involved in this. But what I found also very interesting too is this, in this clear box, that board used to be available for a cool $130. That board is now illegal to purchase And the last time I think I saw it, it was like $500 on eBay or something. So it's no longer manufactured. I don't know. Can't imagine. I mean, this was actually a 2016 article too. So I wish I'd started playing with phones a little sooner. Yeah. So this is another interesting project. So students at Washington University a couple of years ago, well, I don't know if this might have been right before COVID. I forgot what year this was done, but they've created a software app called Sea Glass. And this is the equipment they put together as a cheap man version. So for, a cool couple $100 or $300, $400, you can rig together your own mobile, like fake cell site tower detector, essentially is what they're doing. Due to the sheer volume of how many fake towers are out there, most of the ones that are registered now are public knowledge. So they're Sea Glass software interfaces with known registered towers. So when you flip theirs on, it'll monitor and actually tell you which ones are legit towers and then track whether they're moving or not. So, because a legit tower shouldn't be moving, and a legit tower should be on for more than 5-10 minutes, right? So, or half a day. A lot of things that they report in their paper or whatever is that, they're doing right there just in a couple block radius of Washington University, and then they go over and do a little bit in Seattle. But they found like 56 mobile cell towers, which seems, substantially lower than the older days of around New York City, but, yeah, there's still quite a few people are out there playing with it, what you can do with it. Having not been the bad guy, I'm not entirely sure what kind of data you could get into. I mean, it's like a man-in-the-middle attack, though. You get a lot more fun playing with a Wi-Fi thing and pretending to be Starbucks, but...
Maybe you're doing like some sort of information thing, like what the US
It could be. It could be drug dealers trying to not get caught by the cops, or it could be the cops trying to find the drug dealers. It's a cat and mouse game of who's using what for what. There's a lot of reasons to use mobile cell towers. So those, of course, in anything, there's also a large collection of phone hacking as a service, right? So it's disturbingly easy to hack a phone when you are dealing with people that have access to the SS7. There are such illustrious websites out there for just having a phone number. You can hire their services and deploy their malware to their phone with simply their phone number. And this was kind of like a walkthrough steps of how simple it was to deploy some of this. And the iPhone, though, of course, it circles around actually having their iCloud credentials. So if you actually have their iCloud credentials, you can basically deploy an app to their phone and put one of those other malware packages and track their phone, right? Because I don't know how many people in here, I don't log into my Apple iTunes account and monitor with the devices on it. So you can probably get away with this for the most general public quite easily. And the amount of information, like I say, you're pulling everything like we've been discussing. Kind of freaky. Some of the signs, too, of compromising your phone. I don't know how many people pay attention to how much data their phones chew through. I pretty much use my phone as a phone, so I find it very disturbing when I burn up through 3 or 4 gigs of data, because it's a phone. Yeah, so then that comes to my question is that my phone or is that other people that are on my plan? But my phone is occasionally, but it is also an Apple device, and Apple likes to deploy their stuff. So they burn through a lot of data. Yeah, their updates throw a lot of stuff on. And that was the other thing I missed about my flip phone. Anybody remember when your phone, you charged once a week, instead of every couple hours? My time burned it up. Did you? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Run over a Nokia. That'd be just perfectly fine.
I had like 30 years worth of phones on storage.
Did you?
Every phone I owned for the last 30 years.
Well, I've had two. I've got three now. So, but the 4G.
I broke it too. I had Blackberries, flip phones.
Yeah.
I went through every one of them and took them apart, pulled the memory chips out of them.
Nice. There's some other things too, and I've seen this even on some computers too, where they reactivate while they're in standby mode. Anybody ever watch the light clip on? And I always thought that was kind of odd. I've never found anything odd though, other than that. But I've got a computer that lights up in the middle of the night every once in a while.
Every time we started talking about hacking stuff, his phone would light up.
Yeah.
And then turn the audio recording on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he got something on there.
Talking about hacking something, beep and it would light up and record.
I didn't do that.
Finally turned the phone off.
Yeah. Yeah, I like powering off stuff, but that's the funny things too. Sometimes they turn themselves back on. Some of these new phones you can't really shut off anymore. Oh, you used to be able to shut off my old one. He'd take the battery out.
Just some of the newer iOSs, obviously the battery life has been kind of decreasing.
Yeah.
And so I started using the battery monitoring features that can track cellular chaps or
The malware that battery tracks.
well, it's just it turns out like 90% is Safari.
Oh yeah.
And it's like okay, so that's kind of a it's just if I leave it on certain sites, especially
Well, yeah.
the batteries and that.
The ads.
Try to use a show reader, so on some sites because all the things they're constantly throwing at the browser.
It's nuts. I do a lot of pixel blocking and stuff, and I run an app. And some websites, they're just insane how much comes at it. I mean, even Google's homepage now, like if I leave just a blank page open, there'll be like 12,000 blocks on it in an hour. And that's just their blank screen page with their search bar. It's like, why is there 12,000 blocks on that? So, I mean, Google's joined the crowd of monitoring everything you do too, like everybody else, but it's crazy. This came out in mid or late November, because I know it would be into bug bounties, but Google paid $70,000 for the fellow that figured out how to bypass their security to unlock their phone with biometrics. So, and this was you probably can't read it, so I'll read it off to you guys, but it's, so the new Pixel, when it first came out, it had fingerprint biometrics. So the guy was like, you fail that 3 times, and then you hot swap the SIM card so it's still powered up with your own SIM card to being the attacker, and then enter the wrong PIN number in 3 times, and then it'll request a puke number, which you get to put in with that fake SIM card, and then it'll unlock the phone when you retype your PIN on your attacking SIM. So, thought that was a pretty nice reward.
Did they fix it?
They know about it. They paid $70,000 in November, so fixed. It's probably still in the works. Any questions or answers, or answers for questions?
Just an interesting tidbit article the other day that said that some of the Gen Z, actually a fair number of Gen Z consumers have been switching to flip phones, getting rid of their smartphones because I guess they're getting some form of burnout from constantly being connected.
Yeah. Well, there's actually, as I said, there's like 2 companies that are starting to manufacture flip phones again.
They're doing it to increase their, to reduce their distractions. I have a couple of college kids that have done that.
Interesting.
So they're not messing with their phones instead of, studying or doing other things.
Yeah.
They need to do so. They've done that as a way to just cut out the distraction.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things too. I don't know if anybody paid attention to the graduating class of this year report of the sheer volume of graduating class that don't know how to use computers. Because they grew up on phones and tablets, nobody actually ever taught them to type and keyboard and use Excel and Word documents. And all they know is the iPad, and everybody just assumed that they were naturally, techie because they used an iPhone or their smartphones.
My generation used typewriters.
Yeah.
It's evolution. It's going to evolve.
Yeah.
Computers are going to go away. It's going to be keyboard tablets.
Yeah. Well, no, I understand that too. But like I say, the people coming into work don't know how to use Excel.
So very surely anti-malware on smartphones will save us from these threats.
You mean the malware that's on all of them?
So the anti-malware that you can get from fine companies like McAfee and Norton.
Ironically, there was a very interesting. One of the things on the Pegasus, there was. I'm not familiar with them very well, and I already forgot both the names. But anybody heard of the Linux cell phones? Have any of them actually come out?
Yes.
So
iPhone is out and Librem is out.
the Librem, he was talking about what was very interesting about there was Librem and there was another one that started with an L, that they were actually designing the phone around that the cell modem would be segregated from access to the memory on the phone, so that they wouldn't have access to all the data and information through a modem attack. So it kind of negate the whole Pegasus and attacks and everything. Yeah. Install Facebook, take care of everything for you.
Threats, though.
Hope that was.
All right.
Alrighty, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Hope everybody got something out of that at least.